Hello everybody, my name is Eric D. Johnson, also on BrightShine. We're out here in the city of Memphis, in the county series in the state of Tennessee. Today's date is early, Monday morning, December the 2nd, 2019. And the time 1:50 a.m. First thing, thanks to all my family, my support, for your continued encouragement, support, continue to keep myself employed right here in the Memphis tri-state area. I'll continue to further my education, more college online, continue to pursue my social degree, studying being administrative contract market. At the present time, take a break and go on school. At the very near future, I will be going back to Monroe College online to continue to pursue my social degree, studying being administrative contract market. Back in 2009, 2010, I was a student at Remedy College. I was enrolled in the medical business coding program, and I received, I earned, I graduated and received a diploma in the medical business program, medical business coding program, but I didn't get the certification. So if you don't have a certification, you can't be employed in the healthcare field. So this year, 2019, I enrolled at this school that's called Health Tech Institute in Memphis, in the medical assistant program. It was a 9-month program from January 2019 to October 2019. And I graduated with the diploma and the certification in the medical assistant program, and I'm working on getting another certification in phlebotomy technician and EKG technician and what's the healthcare? Health record specialist. Health record specialist. And so working on that. And this past weekend, this was the Thanksgiving weekend, Thursday. Thanksgiving was last Thursday, so I hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving and everything. And then we had Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I think today is Cyber Monday and everything. So people, it's a good thing you got a job. Black Friday, you was spending money, and then turn it right around. Then they extended Black Friday to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then the first Monday after Thanksgiving is Cyber Monday, and they're still trying to spend some money, because it's coming up to Christmas, so But we're gonna have a good video. We're gonna spend some time on some history, history of the city of Chicago, and we're gonna go into the Bible, and we're gonna continue to speak, be advocates for the church. The church that we're talking about is the church that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God, established in Matthew chapter 13. Hold up. Matthew 16. Excuse me. Matthew chapter 16 verses 13 through 19, and also Matthew chapter 18 verses 15 through 20. See, and we're not talking about the Catholic Church. We're not talking about the Protestant Church. That's the Catholic Church. All them Catholic churches and all the particular churches and all the Protestant churches, and which is the Catholic Church. And we're not talking about the American Restoration Movement, the Stone Campbell Movement. We're not talking about that. And we most certainly not talking about these man-made religious organizations like the Rastafarians and these Hebrew black Israelites. We're not talking about none of that nonsense. We're not talking about this all this Islam stuff. We're talking about some entire submission to the will of God, and talking about you're a Muslim and one who trying to submit that will to the will of God, and talking about some Nation of Islam and Moorish Science Temple of America and all this American Muslim Society. See, it's all some man-made junk. All that junk, some junk. They made it up. Some man-made junk, just like all that sorority and fraternity. They made it up. The same thing, they made it up. Some man-made junk. All these what they call them old world secret societies from Africa and from Asia and from Europe. They made it up. They made it up. Some man-made junk. And so, like I said, we're gonna be advocates for the church. The one and only church that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, Son of God, established. Now that church, as it was many years ago, is not in operation. They just say it's not in operation today. Biblically, it still exists, but physically, that church physically is not in existence because of sin. And the reason, the number one reason is sin. Sin. See, when you continue to live, continue to commit sin, you continue to be a sinner, you continue to be sinful, then the church physically, the church physically is not in operation. You understand? When you don't obey God's word, see, the church spiritually, the spirit gonna always. What did Jesus Christ tell you about the spirit? See, spiritually, the church gonna always be. But you, as a person, as an individual, being disobedient, being defiant. See, that's what you have to understand. See, the church spiritually, God told you, Jesus told you in the word that the spirit gonna be there. He told you. See. But when you be disobedient, when you be defiant, when you being sinful, when you being a sinner, when you committing sin, then physically the church is not in operation. And see, the United Nations. The United Nations is it's well intended. You understand? It's well intended. And it's always because it's man. That's the reason why I said it. Man. Excuse me. Man-made organization. So it's gonna have flaws and it's gonna be things that they're gonna have blemishes and things this next. But like I say, it's well intended, but it's not the church. That's the point. That's the number one point. It's okay, it's okay. United Nations is okay. It's just like the United States of America, or one of the other nations, governments around the world. I mean, you could say, well, that's okay. You have a United States government, have a federal, state, local government. But it's not the church. That's the point. It's not the church. You can go to the United States Department of Justice and you can go to the executive branch and you can go to the state branch and the local branch of governments and to hear your issues in all the departments of their government. But it's not the church. It's not the church. So we want to continue to be advocates for the church. Now we know the United Nations is there. There's a means of being advocating for the church, because like I say, the Catholic Church is not the church, and all that particular church is not the church. Not the church. You can't lie. You can't lie. All the Protestant churches, that is the Catholic Church. All the Protestant churches, that's the Catholic Church. The American Restoration Movement, Stone Campbell Movement, that's not the church. That's not the church. some man-made junk, the Rastafarian. That's not the church. That's not the church now. All this other junk, the Mormons, that's not the church. You're lying. That's not the church. And all this Islam, anti-Semitic to the will of God, and Muslim, one anti-Semitic to the will of God. That's not the church. That's not the church. And so, and you know, all that black Hebrew Israelite, the Jews, that's not the church. It's not the church. It's not the church. So that's, we want to continue to be advocates for the church. We can go to the United Nations and advocate for on behalf of the church. You understand? And we know that human rights, it's a violation of human rights because it's persecution. It's persecution. That's what's being done. See, the church was being persecuted. The church is being persecuted. The church. You understand? And so, what's being, you know, the church been persecuted, the church being persecuted. You know, it's persecution. And it's a violation of human rights. It's a violation of human rights. It's a crime. And you know what? I've been saying this over and over again. I'm gonna keep on saying it's a crime. And I'm gonna keep on saying it over and over again. That it's a crime being committed. It's a crime. It's criminal. It's criminal. Nobody named Louis Farrakhan should be in Chicago. You're a criminal. Jesse Jackson is a criminal. You ain't got no business being in Chicago. There's no such thing as a Baptist church. There's no such thing being a Christian. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. You're a criminal. You lying. See, a lot of things that's being done today should have been resolved years ago. It should have been saying you're a Christian. All these colleges and universities on this earth, they should have been through with it years ago. Years ago. But see, you keep walking around, you know, excuse me, saying all this stuff out your mouth. You just so silly. And, you know, excuse me, you just refuse to be, you know, to obey God. See, that's what I'm saying about the church. See, you being a sinner. You being simple. You committing a sin. There's no such thing as being a Christian. There's no such thing as a Baptist church. There's no such thing as no Catholic church in all these particular churches. No such thing. You lying. There's no such thing. You lying. There's no such thing as no Church of Christ. There's no such thing. You lying. That's the crime that's being committed. There's no such thing as no Rastafarian. You're a criminal. You should be locked up. You should be in jail. You're a criminal. And so that's the point I've been making, I'm going to keep on making. That it's a crime being committed by all these man-made religious organizations. You lying. But it's going to come a day. It's going to come a day when you're going to have to face it. You're going to have to be held accountable, and you're going to be held responsible for the crimes you committed. You're going to be held accountable. I'm going to keep on being an advocate for the church, and you're going. It's just, you know, sometimes the wheels of justice, you know, sometimes it seems like it's taking a long time. It's slow. You know, you have in the judicial system, you have a public defender. You know, you have a public defender, and then you have the prosecuting attorney. You know, then you have a judge. So they gonna, excuse me, for example, the Moorish Science Temple of America and all the rest of them, the American Muslim Society and the Nation of Islam. You know, the public defender reluctantly, they probably be like, well, but still, if you accuse them of committing a crime, they have rights. They have rights. And then the prosecuting attorney side, that's what it comes down to in the judicial system. And then you have the executive and legislative and all this, because at the United Nations you have a government. You have all these people around the world at the United Nations, and there's a process, a legal process, excuse me, to address this issue about the church and about all these man-made religious organizations and the lie you tell them. Because see, I feel in my heart there are many people who feel the same way I feel, that many of the things that's being said, like Christian and Baptist and Catholic, they feel the same way I feel, that it should have been resolved years ago. And the reason why I say that, you have all these colleges and universities on this earth. Some issues, maybe not all issues, but many of the issues that you'll bring up, for example, saying you're a Christian or a Jew, saying you're a Jew, historically, evidence has been discovered. Evidence has been discovered. If you say, well, you don't have no sound proof, but all that archaeological digging and all that, you see what's being done over in Egypt, for example. They keep digging in the ground, and look at what they just recently found in 2019. It made the news. Look what's been done. And look what's being done in Egypt. The archaeologists kept digging in the ground, and look what they found. They found some more mummies. They found some more Egyptian royalty, and they found all these mummified animals and mummified royal people in royalty in Egypt in 2019, because they kept digging in the ground. Now there's some more evidence. It'd be like evidence of what? It's evidence of ancient civilization. It may not necessarily be evidence of, some mathematical proof of anything, but it's evidence that people on this earth, had some type of way of life. And you see all the mummified animals, and that's the way they live. All these mummies, that's the way people live, and that's the way they bury their dead. And then when you talk about royalty, they had some type of government. You know what I'm saying? They had some type of system that they live by. Well, see, that's the evidence that we talking about. Were they Jews? Were they Egyptian people? What type of religion did they have? Well, see, when they kept digging in the ground, that's evidence. That's evidence. That's proof. That's proof. And so, like I said, there are many issues that we bring up should have been resolved many, many years ago. But people insist on continuing to lie. And that's really why I continue saying over and over, going to be advocating for the church at the United Nations. Then from the United Nations, because see, all these people around the world are members of the United Nations. It's going to extend out. It's going to extend out. Then you have the United States government having to deal with all these issues at the United Nations. It's going to be like a chain reaction. Then you have all these other governments around the world. It's going to be a chain reaction. But see, it takes people continue to advocate for the church and continue to push the issue. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, like I say, it may be slow. It may seem that way right now. It may appear that way now. But over a period of time, I feel in my heart that it's going to start becoming a real issue. It's going to become a real issue because it's got to be brought up. It's got to be addressed. It's got to be addressed. You just can't keep turning your television on and then seeing these people do the things they do, and then turn the radio on. Then you keep hearing the Christian Science monitor and all. You can't keep hearing it. You can't keep watching television and seeing people being on television. You can't keep turning your radio on. You can't keep being online. There's got to be something done. We got to address this issue. You can't do that. We can't have all these computers and laptops and all this, and then you still walk around talking about you're a Christian. It can't go for that. They're talking about you're a Jew and talking about you're a Muslim. We can't have. It's got to be addressed right now. From this day forward, it's now. It's right now. We got to clear this up because you lying. You lying. And so let me now we was in the Bible, because I had some time this weekend, so we was in the Bible, and we continue to be in the Bible, and we was talking about the people in the Bible, the Amorites, the Egyptians, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaims, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, the Jebusites, the Hivites, the Philistines, the Moabites, the Midianites, the Ammonites, and the Edomites, and all the other ites. It's some more. But we started. We put emphasis on Genesis chapter 15 when it talks about Abraham. But as you go into other chapters, you continue to read the book of Genesis. Then you go into the book of Exodus and Numbers and Exodus and Leviticus, then Numbers and Deuteronomy, and then so on and so forth. Then you'll see mentioned that there are other ites. There's some more ites or some more people in the Bible. But it's good to get our start on these people here for this reason. When you start reading the book of Genesis, see, it starts talking about the beginning, and before there was any of us living on this earth. And then when it talks about people actually living on this earth, before the flood, and then you have after the flood. Then after the flood is when you really start talking about people, languages, and people being identified specifically. You understand? Specifically, as being Egyptian. Someone being classified as being an Egyptian, or Cush, or understand. And so we're gonna continue our study, and cause see, it's very important. Cause see, that's one of the key points that's gonna be made about this Muslim, about this Islam and Jew, and all this about Christian and all this. See, many people were not the same people, and some people tried to make the claim about these same people, about, for example, Jew and Judaism. They try to make these claims about the Bible and all this. But see, sure, when you go into the Old Testament, these people were not no Jew. There's no place in the Bible that tell you that God told anybody to be a Jew. But when you see these people, when you see the people we just mentioned, and when it talks about God telling the children of Israel, giving a command, telling the children of Israel, destroy these people, because they defied me, they disobeyed me. You understand? And see, one of the points that we want to always remember is God said something that's very profound. God said these people were going after other gods. Now, when you hear God tell you that these people were going after other gods, that means God was talking to all people. And these people defied God and they disobeyed God. See, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was not just talking to the children of Israel. That's a key point. That's a key point to always remember. That the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was not just talking to the children of Israel. Because God said these people were going after other gods. You understand? And see, when God told the Pharaoh of Egypt to let my people go, God gave the Pharaoh and the people of Egypt many opportunities to do what's right. See, God was telling the Pharaoh and the Egyptian people that I'm your God too. See, that's a key point to make. God didn't just tell, wasn't just telling the Pharaoh, telling Moses to go tell Pharaoh these and to let my people go, because to intentionally, but there was something in there that God was saying that I'm your God. I'm your God, just like I'm the God of the children of Israel. I'm your God too. But see, it was me that hardened your heart. It was me. It was me. God. See, God said that to Moses. God told Moses, I'm gonna harden Pharaoh's heart. I'm gonna make his heart hard. See, he the God. God showed Pharaoh and the people of Egypt that I'm your God. Just like I'm the God of the children of Israel, I'm your God. And see, that's the key point to be made. See, God is the God of all the people on this earth. And that's the same thing about the church. See, but it starts with these people. When you talk about Judaism and Jude and saying you're a Christian and all that, see, when you say that, it's them same people that's walking around being defiant and being disobedient. Being disobedient. Because that's where it came from. The occult, so-called devil and worship. There's no such thing as worshiping the devil. Never has been, never will be. And that's the point that we always make. It never has been, never will be. You're going to be punished by God instead of being blessed by God. And so, and saying you're a Christian and all this, it's wrong. They're talking about Islam. What's that? Entire submission to the will of God. And Muslim, one who entirely submits their will to God. See, it goes all the way back to the people we just mentioned. It goes all the way back. See, some people, some people were Indo-European, some people were Afro-Asian, some people were just ancient people. That's a key point. Some people were some of these ancient people who were still, some people, as it says in some people older than other people. They, the archaeologists that did all this digging and they did all this DNA testing and all this carbon dating. Some people are considered to be older than other people. They talking about the different skeletons they found, and some people are older than other people. You understand? And so that's a very important point to make. It's a very important point to make, that there are people who were considered to be older there are other groups of people who were living on this earth. And when it comes to those, to what we call community, they just say communication. And in communication, you have language. You have language. So when you say the Egyptian people and the Hebrew people, they all Afro-Asiatic. But then there were some people who are not Afro-Asiatic. You had these Indo-European people. That's an important point to make. Because these people were living on this earth. They were living around each other. Then they communicated with each other. And so that's an important point to make. How is it? What is it that you're saying about skin color and eye color, hair texture, height, weight, the physical features, and then you have all this not just verbally, when we say communicate, but the outward, just like people wear their clothes and how did people eat, and this big issue about the supreme being. Now the Indo-European, they'll make an issue about it, and they should. How is it that the Indo-European and the Afro-Asiatic can live around each other and talk about the supreme being? See, it's gonna be it's gonna be an issue. And then you got all these people who want to make the point that when they study Egypt, you have all these people that are Nilo-Saharan who were living in Egypt. It's been a point that's been made. It's not just me but about the Pharaoh, and they want to bring up issues like when we say Egypt is Afro-Asiatic, but there are people who were living in Egypt who were not in bondage, who were not necessarily Afro-Asiatic, Nilo-Saharans, who were part of the government, who part of the people who, and so just like we were talking about this archaeologists digging in the ground recently. Here it is, 2019, and they then dug up some people, some more Egyptian people. And then when they do research on the people, they find some people were not Afro-Asiatic. They were not what you call a Egyptian Afro-Asiatic, possibly Nilo-Saharan, or might have been an Indo-European, might have been a Philistine in Egypt, because the children of Israel were living in Egypt, but even before they went into bondage. So things like that can be brought up. And then you had the issue about the Egyptian people when the Romans when the Greeks and the Romans were in control of Egypt. See, these things will be brought up. And so there again, when you talk about Islam, entire submission to the will of God, and then when you talk about Muslim, one who entirely submits their will, one who entirely submits their will to God. See, things like that are important. So we gonna make these points, and we're gonna continue to be advocates for the church. But what we're gonna do now, we're gonna continue to go into the history of Chicago. It's important. So let's do that. Before we go to the history of Chicago, let's don't forget the maps. Now this is a world map for all the people on this earth. Now this is a map of the languages of Africa. Now this is also a map of the languages of Africa. Now this is also a language map of the languages of Africa. Now this is an Afro-Asiatic language distribution map. This is also an Afro-Asiatic language distribution map. Now this is a Nilo-Saharan language distribution map. This is also a Nilo-Saharan language distribution map. And this is a Niger-Congo language distribution map. This is also a Niger-Congo language distribution map. this is an Albanian language map. This is a Baltic language map. Now this is a Greek language map. This is a Slavic language map. This is an Altaic language map. And this is the Euro-Altaic language map. And this is a Romanian language map. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna go to the history of Chicago. Don't forget. I won't forget. like I say, oh, all right, turn the microphone off. Okay. But see, as you can see, the history of Chicago, some people might say, like, why that's so important. Well, see, the history of America, the history of the world, it's important to see people interact with one another, become in contact with one another. And just like we were talking about in the Bible, people live around it. Look at how America is today. They always say, for example, that America is a great melting pot. You have all these people. You have all these people from Europe. You have all these people from Asia. You have all these people from Africa. You have some of the original Americans, indigenous, Americans, the first Americans who were living here before the Europeans came here. See, all these things, the Hawaiians, the people who were from China, and the reason why I say that, because the Chinese people, they have a culture and a language. And then you have the Japanese people, then you have the Korean people. So you can't lump everybody. You can't just lump everybody just based on looks. Just like we looked at the map in Africa, the languages of Africa, you have a lot of dark-skinned people. And not only dark-skinned, you got a lot of people whose hair texture is coarse, but language different, culture different. I mean, you can't have Niger Congo people being around Nilo-Saharan people, as you can see today in Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, when you see the Nilo-Saharan people, and then you see the Niger Congo people, you see the problems that you have. You don't even see no Afro-Asiatic people, barely. It's very rare that you see Afro-Asiatic people living in sub-Saharan Africa. And because of Islam, that's one of the reasons why you see Afro-Asiatic people walking around in sub-Saharan Africa. It's because of Islam. If it weren't for Islam, ain't no way in the world no Afro-Asiatic be walking around. It's just because you see all that xenophobia they've been talking about in sub-Saharan Africa. That's the reason why. You see the things that happen now in Europe when you're having people from Africa leaving Africa, trying to go to Europe. Look at the problems that you have. Same thing in America. The history of Chicago. See, you have people that's walking around, they had this ideology, they had this concept, and their concept is, understand, different. Their concept is different from another person's concept. You got the Baptists and the Methodists. They all claim to be a Christian, but they'll get to fighting. The Baptists and the Methodists. It can be two African Americans. They'll sit there and argue about the Bible, claiming that they're trying to be a Christian. It can be two white men. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. You can have two white men walking around. One could be a Catholic, and the other one could be a Presbyterian or a Lutheran. They'll get to fight. Yeah, they will. They'll get into a fist fight. You have to go over there and break it up and, get in between them and pull them apart. But see, that's the history of Chicago, the history of America. It's important to know the history. Because if you know the history of Jesus, that's the reason why you have all these different concepts. Not supposed to. That's the reason why I do the things I do. Because I know that all this stuff, I can say I know there's only one church. I know it's only one church. It's only one. And all that Catholic church and all that particular church, all that Protestant churches and all that American Restoration movement, Stone Camel movement is wrong. The Rastafarian, that's wrong. The Black Hebrew Israelite, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. Islam, wrong. It's wrong. So that's the reason why the history of Chicago is important. Because see, in all that, you see Chicago, you see people moving around. It's important. Now that the website I've been going to now, recently, ChicagoGangHistory.com. The other website is not up and running right now. I don't know if they'll come back. I used to go to their website all the time, ChicagoGang.org. I mean, it was there for a while. I used to go there all the time, and the history of Chicago, and I mean, it was a very, very informative website. Recently, this, even this year, I was going to that website. Then, a few months ago, it went down. It went down. It was like, I would say around the summer. The website just, it wasn't up and running no more. But the website I've been going to recently is ChicagoGangHistory.com. And what we're going to go today is the Black Disciples, the Almighty Black Disciple Nation, and King David Barksdale, as well as King Larry Who, and Gangster Disciple Nation, and what the Gangster Nation, you understand? Now time don't permit to go in depth, but we're gonna do the Almighty Black Disciple Nation today, and that includes, as you know, it includes King Larry and the Gangster Nation and the Gangster Disciples. Now, when you go to the website, they have all the gangs that's in the city of Chicago. You have white gangs, you have Hispanic, Latino gangs, all the African American gangs. Now, when it comes to the Asian gangs like that, based on population, it's not as prevalent. It's not, it's very. Most times you see some Asians, they gonna be members of, you understand, like recently, if you see some of the Black Disciples or the Gangster Disciples or the Vice Lords or the Black P Stones and Mickey Cobras, it's a possibility you will see some Asians, in these gangs, because the population is not as big as the African American population and the whites in the Hispanic Latino gang. Just like let's just say, for example, some Filipinos, some people from the Philippines, they speak Spanish, they're Latin. There's a possibility they might be some Latin kings or queens or some Latin folks. You understand? But not saying that it's not per se a Philippine gang in Chicago, just the Filipinos by themselves. But trying to be in Chicago, and just because you go get a gun and it's 100 Filipinos just came to America, and you see all these African Americans, and you see all these Hispanic, Latino, and then you see all these white gangs trying to survive, most likely you'll be a member of them gangs that's already up. Okay. So like I said, we're gonna go to the Black Disciples, and now, as you know, the Black Disciples were founded in 1958 by David Barksdale, Richard Strong, Dirk Ackland, and Prince Oldtimer in or near Inglewood Park, Hyde Park. And then the colors, black, red, and blue. And the symbols, you had the symbols, and they still act them today. So let's go into the history of Chicago, the city of Chicago, and we're going to talk about the almighty Black Disciple Nation, the Black Disciples, or as they started, the Devil Disciples. Now, the Black Disciple history is indeed a fascinating history and a great story how young pre-teen boys, young boys, got together and formed an organization that would help fight against the civil rights injustices and wild gangs around them. Now I'll be reading, we will start the story back in the year 1958 to the impoverished northern half of the Hyde Park neighborhood, the impoverished southern Kentwood area, and in Inglewood. In Hyde Park and Kentwood, wealthier white greater youths were bullying several black youths. Hyde Park had always enforced restrictive racial covenants in the early time, but in the late 40s it was deemed unconstitutional. Therefore, black families began to move into the older northern section of the Hyde Park neighborhood. By the later 50s, blacks were moving into this area and southern Kentwood at a high rate as this area became more affordable. In Inglewood, black families began moving in at a very high rate in this neighborhood, causing many Italian families and Italian greasers resentment, and soon bullying ensued. There were also white and black gangs from outside of Inglewood, Hyde Park, and Kentwood that invaded and bullied these youths. Some of the bullied youths from Kentwood, Hyde Park, and Inglewood got together as friends and decided to create a club that would fight against all these enemies. These boys were only 11 and 13 years old in age, and they all sat down to figure out the name of this new organization. They decided to flip through the Holy Bible to get ideas, and that's when it dawned on them to use the name Disciples in their title. The boys that added on the prefix Devils to give the name an intimidating edge to it. After that was decided, the Disciples were simultaneously at 49th in Dorchester and Kentwood, 53rd in Kembar and Hyde Park, and scattered throughout Inglewood between 56th Street down to 67th Street. Some founding members were Richard Champ Strong, David Barksdale, Mingo Shred, Prince Oldtimer, Kilroy, Leonard Longstreet, Nightwalker, and various others. The Disciples had no central leader in their earliest days, and they kept their business out of the press. The Disciples established headquarters at the Hyde Park intersection of 53rd and Kembar, which became their very first stronghold. The Disciples created the symbols of the Star of David, the pitchfork, and devil's tail with devil horns when they formed in 1958. The first arch enemy of the Disciples was the Rebels, which was a white gang of greasers in Inglewood, West Inglewood, and Gage Park. There were over 2,000 rebels, and they were very racist towards blacks. Disciples also fought with other black gangs in Inglewood like the Egyptian Cobras that moved to the neighborhood from the west side of Chicago in 1958. Disciples also fought with the Blackstone Raiders that had settled along Garfield Boulevard. The Raiders would eventually become the Blackstone Rangers, and then eventually the Black Pea Stones. So we went over that yesterday on my previous video. In the year 1959, Disciples made their first expansion move as they settled in the western part of the Woodlawn community, west of Woodlawn Avenue, as they took over about 2/3 of the Woodlawn neighborhood. The other one-third was all Blackstone Ranger territories, who became arch rivals, along with more Egyptian cobras that had settled there as well. As the years of 1958 to 1961 went by, the disciples became especially powerful in northern Inglewood as white flight ran its course and more black families moved in, creating excellent recruiting opportunities. By 1961, the Devil's Disciples were the most powerful gang in Inglewood, and the Italian Greaser gang were fighting that losing war against the Disciples. In the year 1961, 14-year-old David Barksdale took over leadership of the Devil's Disciples, and he directly oversaw the Inglewood branch of the Disciples. Barksdale appointed Mingo as president of the Disciples in Hyde Park and Kenwood. They became known as the East Side Disciples. Barksdale set to work absorbing several other small gangs on the south side, turning them into disciple gangs. These gangs will still retain their original name, but all had the last name of Disciple. All other branches of the Disciples outside of Inglewood had their own president. The Hyde Park Kenwood chapter was at its peak around when Barksdale took over, as they had members from 43rd down to 53rd between the two neighborhoods. But starting in 1960, the University of Chicago backed the program to renovate southern Kenwood and northern Hyde Park by clearing out slum buildings and renovating some of the older and salvageable homes. This action would increase the value of these neighborhoods and push impoverished black families out, causing most of these families to move to Inglewood. As the family began moving in the early 60s, the Disciples grew stronger in Inglewood, and gradually a new headquarters was set up at 63rd and Normal in the year 1963. Because many homes were raised at 53rd and Kenbar and Hyde Park, and the Kenbar Shopping Plaza was built over half of the Disciple headquarters. In the same year that David Barksdale took over power of the Disciples, Richard Strong and his family moved into the Cabrini Green public housing project that was mostly ran by very small gangs and Egyptian cobras. Strong developed quite a following in no time and recruited several black youths into the Devil's Disciples. This is the story of how black disciples and gangster disciples first landed in Cabrini Green. The Devil's Disciples were the largest gang on the south side by 1965 and before. Even after the Blackstone Rangers started, Rangers were not as large. The Rangers only appeared larger because they were more outspoken to media outlets. On the date of January 6, 1966, the Disciples perceived the Rangers as a threat due to their aggressive recruitment measures. In order to counteract this threat, David Barksdale had the idea to create a unity among several gangs on the south side that mutually hated the Rangers. This was to be a coalition that would absorb these gangs under one disciple nation. This new coalition would become known as the Black Disciple Nation. The coalition expanded disciple boundaries beyond the Inglewood, Hyde Park, and Kenwood area, put them in further south side neighborhoods like Greater Grand Crossing, Woodlawn, Washington Park, as they absorbed up several small black gangs in all these communities, causing the disciple number to grow into the thousands. Every gang that absorbed into the Black Disciple Nation adopted the last name of disciple added on to their name. This spreading of this nation did not gain much notoriety due to the disciples keeping the activity low-key. Therefore, you don't read much about it in the history book. What you will read all about is how the rival Black Peakstone Nation spread all over the place after that nation was created in May of 1966. To counteract the Black Disciple Nation again, it was because Stones were more outspoken to media outlets. In 1966, the Black Disciple Nation became heavily active in the community, opening fundraisers, legitimate businesses, enforcing school policy to keep kids in school. There are many sources on the internet that go into great detail about all the legit things the Black Disciple Nation and the black gangster disciple nation did back in the 1960s that is very easy to find. Therefore, I do not need to go into extended detail about it, but there was some positive activity that came out of all of this. Maybe some of that money went to illegal activity, but a great deal of it went into helping the community. David Barksdale used his power for some good, as can be seen. The disciples were also tied to civil rights groups that fought against civil rights and justice. In this summer 1966, the disciples even tried a peace treaty with the Rangers. This didn't last, but at least there was a large attempt. In the year In the year 1967, the Woodlawn organization was awarded over $927,000 to be handed out to the Blackstone Rangers and the Black Disciples to operate job training centers for neighborhood youth in Woodlawn. All disciples and rangers were paid a salary to be instructors of this program despite the lack of training. Disciples received about $360,000 of this money for the program. In these programs, there were both disciple and ranger instructors and students in these classrooms. Sometimes gang fights and shootings happened in the classes. Black Peace Stones and disciples squashed their war in May of 1968, and it lasted for days until May 8th. David Barksdale was out in the area of 65th and Ellis in the Woodlawn area when the detectives showed up to talk to him. Barksdale told the cops that the Ellis Rebel Stones, the only Stone group in West Woodlawn, was out to kill him. He did a test and led the cops to the end of an alley, and sure enough, the Stones opened fire and shot at David. The Stones were then arrested, but this also ended the peace treaty. In the year 1968, war began between the Black Disciples and Gangster Nation. Larry Hoover became the target for assassination attempt. He was shot on 2 occasions. Then on September 4, 1968, a third attempt was made on him. On this day, Inglewood was on high alert. As disciples, Gangsters and Stones were packing guns and ready to shoot each other. At Parker High School, members of the Supreme Gangster and disciples were especially ready to get into drama against each other. Baron disciple member James Highsmith and disciple co-founder Leonard Longstreet and the Parker High School, even though they weren't students. The two spotted Larry Hoover standing outside of the principal's office, and Highsmith walked past him with a smile as Longstreet shouted out, "Burn him." Highsmith pulled out a .32 pistol and shot Larry Hoover and 2 others nearby. No one was killed, but Highsmith was convicted of the shooting and sentenced to 1 to 5 years. During that fall season of 1968, the guns were blazing all over the South Side as disciples, Gangsters, and Stones were at each other's throats as bodies were dropping. This led to a temporary truce between the 3 organizations that didn't last long, but it was an attempt to curtail the several acts of violence on the South Side. During the same year, 1968, Jeff Fort and the Black Peace Stone were raking in thousands of dollars in government grant money after projecting the public appearance as a community youth group in need of funding to help poverty. The money went to a lot of good and actually helped open legitimate businesses that helped young blacks. But on the other side of it, some of the money was used for illegal activity, and this caught the attention of the FBI that began investigations. The same groups that granted money to the Stones also gave money to the disciples as well. The disciples did not stick their necks out as much for the money and more or less received the money as a default because the gang apologists and liberal groups wanted to give money to the rivals of the Stones too. When Stones were questioned about who their worst rival is, they pointed to the disciples, and that prompted these groups to line the pockets of the Black disciples as well, many of the time without disciples even asking for the money. Disciples used a lot of this money for good, just like the Stones, as they opened legit business and created programs to help black youth on the South Side, just like how the Vice Lords and Stones were doing. Just like Vice Lords and Stones, the Disciples fell under FBI investigation for mismanaging those funds for illegal activities such as buying drugs and guns. The Disciples involved with mismanaging these funds was not much in the newspaper because of their lower profile activities, and the Disciples didn't trust white people and the social casework. They practically had no choice by 1968 to deal with them after the money was practically forced on them. By the year 1968, the Robert Taylor Home public house project was ran by gangs like the Cobra Stone, Mickey Cobra, 14-year-old black disciple Vanguard, heavy hitter enforcer Mickey Bull Johnson moved into the Robert Taylor Home in 1966 and became one of the first disciples in these projects at the age of 12. Johnson led his company to take over a large piece of the building between 49th and State down to 53rd and State in the Grand Boulevard in Washington Park neighborhood in 1968. His conquest against the Cobra Stone was a success, and Mickey Bull put the disciples in the Robert Taylor Home for the first time in history. He then became the leader of all black disciple operations in those buildings. In June of 1969, Larry Hoover had completely had enough of the Stones and conference with rival David Barksdale instead. David Barksdale wanted the same type of plan that Jeff Fort wanted, which was to absorb gangsters and disciples together as black gangster disciples. However, David's plan would offer Larry to rule alongside David Barksdale, as both men would become kings. Although this was a murder concept, it was not a combination into one gang. It was still an alliance, but a closer conceptual alliance than what Stones had with the gangsters. Larry accepted this offer because him and David would have equal say in how the alliance operated. This was a much more attractive deal for Larry Hoover, and he accepted this offer, and this brought about the birth of the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. Name: Prince Oldtimer was appointed the Prince of the Disciples, while Tennessee the Prince of the Gangsters. Again, this was still just an alliance, but it was a combined concept alliance unlike the one between the Stones and the gangs. All disciple gangs and gangster gangs were all black gangster disciples. Many disciples objected to this and only wanted to see this as a loser alliance, just like how the Stones and gangsters had it. But the majority ruled, and this was to remain a combined concepts alliance with separate rules. In June of 1969, Vice Lords, Black P. Stone, and Black Gangster Disciples all got together to form a coalition known as the Lord Stones and Disciples, or LSD. This was a unity of the gangs so they could march on the government and demand equal rights, better jobs, and all the oppression and poverty in their neighborhood. This coalition effectively slowed down gang violence between these three organizations, even after CBL Incorporated went defunct in the fall of 1970. For the rest of 1969, the LSD coalition really set aside a lot of gang wars as they marched on City Hall, universities, and everywhere, until finally in January of 1970, they achieved some success in bringing about the Chicago Plan, which was an agreement to implement the employment of minorities in Chicago's construction industry. The final agreement lists 3,000 jobs or training positions in 4 categories, but a coalition spokesman claimed that the actual final agreement called for 1,000 jobs in each category. It was soon discovered in the early 1970s that the Chicago Plan was failing about not producing like it should, and by October 1973, the LSD coalition disbanded. At some point in the later 1960s, disciples settled in many further south side neighborhoods all the way down to Riverdale and Morgan Park. Disciples also settled in south suburban communities like Chicago Heights, Robbins, Ford Heights, Harvey, Markham, Dixmoor, and Phoenix. Since 1966, David Barksdale had been working with leaders of the Black P-Stone on several failed peace treaties. By June of 1970, another weak peace treaty was in effect, but this was broken on June 7, 1970, when David Barksdale was shot in his side at a bar at 848 West 69th Street, 69th in Peoria, in the Inglewood neighborhood. The shooters were Black P-Stone. Larry Hoover was there with Barksdale when the shooting started and acted quickly after Barksdale was shot by quickly getting Barksdale into his car. Hoover then raced to St. Bernard's Hospital in Inglewood and was accredited with saving David Barksdale's life. After Barksdale suffered an M14 bullet wound in his side that passed into his kidneys, causing terrible damage. And before the 1970s, Cabrini Green was run by various different gangs with a good number of Egyptian cobras and black disciples running some of the buildings or parts of the building. In the early 1970s, a bid for domination of these projects began and first caught wind in the news when 2 officers were shot dead by snipers on the rooftops of the project building. There was an existing war between black deuces and Egyptian cobras that prompted police to investigate. This is how serious this war was becoming. In 1971, Richard Strong, the Cabrini Green disciple founder, started a group called the Blacks, which was a civil rights group that aimed to help the people of Cabrini Green facing injustice. Eventually, the Blacks and the Deuces were merged together, then eventually merged into the Black Disciples. The war ran its course, and by about 1972, the Disciples and Cobras dominated these buildings. In the early 1970s, investigations into street gangs using government funding for illegal activity came to a close, as they now had evidence to convict high-ranking gang members from the Black P-Stone. In 1971, top leaders of the Black P-Stone were officially charged, and by 1972, Jeff Fort was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The investigation didn't stop with the Stones, though. The investigation went after the vice lord and shut down their legit business. Then they aimed their crosshairs at the Black Gangster Disciple. Authorities ended up getting Mingo to testify before the grand jury against his own organization. However, no charge was brought upon the disciple, but government funding was cut off. Stones and vice lords had members testify against their own gangs too in these proceedings. They called vice lords and Stones to face prison time, but Mingo's testimony failed to convict anyone. Instead, Mingo was severely beaten on the streets by the disciple for snitching on his own gang, own kind. The same exact money they convicted the Stone somehow didn't get the disciple convicted, even though both groups were technically mismanaging funds. It seemed like the government just had it out for the Stones more. A harsh conviction did come down on the disciples. In 1973, though, when on February 26, 1973, Larry Hoover ordered the death of William Pookie Young, a 19-year-old drug dealer in the neighborhood that stole drugs and money from the Black Gangster Disciple. Larry Hoover then ordered Andrew Howard to kill him, and it all happened in 68 in Union in the Inglewood neighborhood in the alley. Young was shot 6 times in the head. On March 16, both men were arrested and charged with the murder. By November 5, 1973, Hoover and Howard were sentenced to 150 to 200 years in prison in Statesville Correctional Facility in Crest Hill, Illinois. As Larry Hoover was now sitting in prison, while David Barksdale was the main face for the Black Gangster Disciple Nation in the street, David also started to become very ill. In 1974, David Barksdale began to suffer serious health problems as his kidneys were slowly shutting down. The 1970 assassination attempt by the Black P-Stone may not have initially killed him, but in the long run it brought an agonizing fate that led to his death. On September 2, 1974, the fond memory will live on of King David as a positive leader that truly worked to better life for disciples. David Barksdale was no drug dealer. He was no killer, or at least not on record. He was no killer. He was barely even a criminal. He was the king of the disciples. But when you look at his old rap sheet, you really couldn't tell. David wasn't full of money and power like Jeff Fort, and he didn't even make money like Larry did. On record, he was a small-town hustler. They committed petty crimes, and he had no real felonies on his record. Here's a list of crimes on record recorded on David Barksdale from a list from the NGCRC website, written by Joey and Mouse. And what they talking about right here is all the arrests. The time that David Barksdale was arrested. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna scroll through and move on. Now, as you can see from this rap sheet, he was no kingpin and was more focused on the activist side of the disciple operation. Barksdale was very much feared, and some even said just looking at him sent shivers up his spine. Barksdale did not have a hard side, but he was also generous to those disadvantaged. He would go to the Burnham School at 74th and Chapel in the South Shore neighborhood, and he was stacked on dollar bills to the children in the schoolyard in the early 1970s. After Barksdale passed in 1974, he was dearly missed, especially by the gangster gangs allied with the black gangster disciple nation. Most of the disciples were also very mournful and wanted to continue growing a closer unity with the gangsters, but there was a large group of the disciples that didn't agree with growing closer to the gangsters and perhaps interpreted David's teachings differently. This group held grudges from the 1968 war, and now that David passed, they began to fracture away from black gangster disciple nation laws and went on their own. The gangsters and most disciples that still followed black gangster disciple nation were furious, and conflict began between black gangster disciples and this group of disciples. In the Robert Taylor home, Mickey Bull was advancing in rank as a top vanguard and was still running the building between 49th Street and 53rd Street, especially the 5 white buildings at 51st and State and the red buildings on 49th. He was put in prison in 1973 for manslaughter charges, then was released in 1975. Now by the summer 1976, he had enough power to order deeds it needed to be done. In July 1976, Todd White had stopped in the Robert Taylor by the 484 South State Street building. White was not known around there and was wearing fancy clothes and drove a nice car. Mickey Bull and Thaddeus Terrell saw the man and saw an opportunity to rob White. Mickey Bull approached White while Terrell walked up and put a pistol to White's temple and told him to give them all his money. White said he had no money, and Bull searched him and found nothing. Bull then grabbed the man by his necktie and dragged him across the street. White gave a wisecrack saying, "I told you I didn't have any money." Then he twisted away and started to run. Bull was enraged because the man not only got physical and started running, but also because of his wisecrack. But Bull did not have to shoot White. Instead, he told Terrell to do it. Terrell then fired one shot right through White's chest. Mickey then said, "Pop him again. Make sure he's dead." After the incident, both Terrell and Johnson were charged with murder, even though Bull was still on parole for the 1973 manslaughter. He was only given 5 years for the murder and was back on in Robert Taylor by 1977. By the year 1976, Larry Hoover wanted to reach a resolution to absolve this 2-year disorganization between disciples and gangsters and to carry on the legacy that David Barksdale had left. All of the gangster groups agreed with Larry. Larry had earned a lot of respect from the majority of the disciples, and they were on board as well with the resolve to make the black gangster disciple nation more than just an alliance. It would be a complete merger into one nation, and the idea would bring about organization and complete unity. However, some disciples were dissatisfied with this idea, many of which were the same disciples that fractured away from the black gangster disciple nation after David's death, the new Black Gangster Disciple Nation did become official that year, and the majority of the disciples became Black Gangster disciples alongside the gangsters and Larry Hoover. But the rest of the disciples, led by Don Dirt Ackland, split away entirely and brought back the name Black Disciples. This time it meant one organization and not an alliance. As soon as Dirt Ackland organized the Black Disciples, an immediate civil war began between the Black Disciples and Black Gangster Disciples. They brought bloodshed on the streets. In the prison system, Black Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples were at each other's throats with no resolve, and there was basically chaos everywhere. Although there was a split on the streets, there wasn't as much clarification on the difference between Black Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples, but in prison, it was very clear. Mickey Bull was incarcerated again in the late 1970s. Before Bull went into prison, he managed to convince several members of the Mickey Cobras from a 49th and State Street Robert Taylor building to become Black Disciples. These Mickey Cobras were known as the Fidel Castro Mickey Cobra. The building that was taken was the 4844 building. Larry Hoover showed his absolute power in Statesville Prison on April of 1978 when he got together with members of the Black Gangster Disciples, Black Soul, Vice Lord, L. Rukins, that's the Black Peastone, the Mickey Cobras, and organized a work stop strike against foul food that was being served to inmates, making them sick. During this strike, Larry Hoover also got together with leaders of several rival and allied organizations from all over the city in this prison. Now that they showed unity by assembling this work stop, the unity was taken further, or perhaps it was arranged while creating the stoppage in the first place. Regardless of when it exactly happened, the creation of the Folk and People Alliance happened in April of 1978. Stemming from this work stoppage protest, this organizing led to another big sit-down with members of allied and enemy nations to discuss how to control the gang wars in the prison system. He proposed two rival coalitions that all major gangs would follow. They could be controlled by negotiations between the leaders of each of these coalitions, just like how the Italian mafia organized their gang wars between families. For Larry's own organization and his own ally, he assembled the Folk Alliance, which united Black Gangster Disciples, Black Disciples, Ashland Vikings, Ambrose, 2-6, Satan Disciples, Maniac Latin Disciples, the Spanish Cobras, Imperial Gangsters, the Latin Eagles, Simon City Royals, and Insane Popes, to have complete peace among each other and work together. His rivals agreed to this and assembled their own coalition called the People Alliance. The People Alliance was assembled by the El Rukins, Vice Lord, and Latin Kings as they allied with Latin Counts, the Bishops, the Mickey Cobras, 400 Hustlers, Insane Unknown, Spanish Lord, and Puerto Rican Stones. This became a very effective coalition in the prison system, and it drastically reduced violence between Black Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples. There was a pretty solid peace between Black Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples from late 1978 until late 1979, until a flare-up happened in Statesville but got patched up only to return a year later. In late 1980, another flare-up began again and heightened on January 29, 1981, when an incident happened in Statesville. In Statesville prison, Unit B, Black Disciple gang member George Bailey resided in this unit along with members of the Black Gangster Disciple. Bailey was allowed a privileged duty known as cell house help, which allowed inmates to roam freely in the cell block without cuffs or escort by guards, according to court document. Black Gangster Disciple leader Ernest Smokey Wilson disapproved of black disciples being cell house helpers and declared that all black disciples should either resign from this position or flip to become black gangster disciples. Wilson even held a meeting in that unit for black gangster disciples and black disciples to attend in order to lay out the rules. 3 black disciples, including Bailey, were in attendance, and 2 of those 3 black disciples resigned from their position and listened to Wilson going to court docket, but Bailey would not drop the position. The black disciples did not like this rule that Wilson imposed, and for 2 weeks straight, they chanted black disciple power every night around 8 p.m. according to court documents. Wilson then had a meeting with Dirk Ackland, who, as I stated earlier, was a black disciple founder and leader, to express Wilson's dissatisfaction of this revolt for the black disciple. But apparently it got nowhere, so Wilson picked a fist fight with Bailey, which got Wilson thrown in segregation, and on January 29th, he will return back to his unit and met with fellow black gangster disciples to plot the murder of Bailey. The black gangster disciple obtained an aluminum bat, which ended up in the hands of Fred Bobo Collins. Later on that day, Collins struck Bailey in the head with the bat repeatedly, which caused Bailey to be hospitalized on February 5, 1981. Bailey died according to court documents. In the year 1981, Mickey Bull was released from prison and was given a new rank as bishop, which was a very high position. Jerome Freeman was also released that same year, and Dirk Ackland placed Freeman in charge of the black disciples on the street. Mickey Johnson was like a prophet that informed all the disciples that were not following black gangster disciple laws that they were now part of the black disciple nation that was created 5 years earlier in prison. Now the split was official on the streets, and the black gangster disciple nation alliance was defunct, as now there were 2 separate organizations that were only tied loosely by the folk alliance. Mickey also taught black disciples about the folk alliance and all the bylaws associated with it. He was also pivotal in getting the word out to Hispanic and white gangs about the folk alliance. Mickey also taught black disciples the new hand sign, which was the gates, or the 3 fingers. This was the new hand sign. Gangsters also got released from prison that same year and began flipping members from the old black gangster disciple into black gangster disciples, which included many groups of disciples. Mickey Johnson made sure not all of the state Wayne Gardens became black gangster disciples, and even convinced most of the Dale Vikings to flip to black disciples, making the black disciples have a strong presence in the Stateway Gardens. This is the story of how black disciples got into the Stateway Gardens. In the year 1982, Mickey Bull and the black disciples took over the long-standing Mickey Cobra buildings near 45th and State. This was the 4555 and 4525 building, which was the Cobras held since 1962. This left the Mickey Cobras with only the whole, which was 3 buildings from 53rd and State down to 54th and State. Mickey Bull had successfully pushed the Mickey Cobra south of 53rd Street. In 1982, the war between black gangster disciples and black disciples almost came to an end after Dirk Ackland was released from prison and disapproved of how powerful Jerome Freeman had become. Dirk then created his own group of black disciples to go against Freeman's, called the Asiatic Apostles, and a civil war began within the black disciples. As a result of this war, relations between black gangster disciples and black disciples smoothed over, as these 2 black disciple factions were focused and removing each other until Dirk Ackland's black disciples went back to the rest of the black disciples in 1983 or 1984. In the year 1984, Mickey Bull was promoted again to the rank of minister, which gave him his own dynasty Being a minister was a very high rank that usually no one received in the organization. Having a dynasty means you control on entire area of the city. Mickey's dynasty was the entire south side of Chicago, anywhere from Bronzeville down to the Wild 100 was controlled by Mickey. His main territory that he directly supervised daily was the Robert Taylor home. He held black disciple meetings in front of the 4950 building. Bull himself stayed at the 5041 South Federal Street in apartment 1505 with Brenda Ware. He ran that building and all the buildings around. In the early 1980s and mid-1980s, relation between black disciples and black gang disciples was at its best point, especially now that folk nation especially now that folk nation rules and regulations reached the street. Now both gangs will often team up against rivals like Vice Lord, Black Pete Stone, and Mickey Cobras. The crack cocaine epidemic of the late 1980s caused relations between the two gangs to completely break down, mainly because of crack trade in the Inglewood neighborhood. Beginning in the year 1987, fierce competition and intense gang wars erupted in the high-rise public housing projects. Citywide gangs began muscling in on these buildings and began setting up their own security as they walked through the hallways armed with automatic weapons and shotguns. As they patted down residents and imposed curfew, the competition was fierce. They even controlled the elevators in the projects and would jump down the shaft and hitch rides up and down. The Inglewood neighborhood in Chicago was violent and most impoverished neighborhood. And just like the high-rise housing project, the Inglewood community became a hotbed for crack cocaine use, which made distribution large money making community. The black disciple had a long-rooted history in the Inglewood community, as the largest piece of their story started on these streets, and they felt ownership of these neighborhoods. Black Pete Stone and Mickey Cobra were never welcomed by black disciples in this neighborhood, but now the black disciples' biggest allies, the black gangster disciples, were muscling in on too many black disciple drug spots because black gangster disciples felt they were entitled due to being the larger organization and sitting at the top of the folk nation line. Black disciples felt disrespected from their black gangster disciple brethren. By 1989, the tempers began to flare. Jerome Freeman ended up back in prison with a 28-year sentence for felony drug charges in 1989, and soon after all hell was about to break loose on the streets of Inglewood. This was the beginning of severe conflict between black disciples and black gangster disciples. In the hot summer of 1991, some gangster disciples were ready for war with the black disciples, but Mickey Bull were holding relations tight between the two organizations, and this was a threat to gangster disciples. They did not want to be controlled this way. Bull was not expecting gangster disciples to come after him because there was no full-fledged war yet. He was also untouchable, and many black disciples and gangster disciples feared and respected him. Mickey was mild-mannered and charming, but he would also have no tolerance for those that crossed him. When he walked the streets, he had a special whistle that black disciples knew. When Mickey whistled, it meant he was summoning some soldier forbidden. It didn't matter what you were doing. If you were laying in bed with the flu, if you were laying in bed with your girl, if you were talking, taking a shit, it didn't matter. You had to stop everything and rush outside to Mickey when he whistled. He had this kind of power, and enemies could not touch because he could see it coming. But in August of 1991, he never expected gangster disciples to come at him. And this is what happened. Members of the gangster disciples shot him dead on the streets, which caused an immediate violent backlash from the black disciples that became legendary. Payback had to be harsh for this, and on August the 7th, Inglewood was a war zone. By August of 1991, during one of the hottest and driest summers in Chicago history, the feud between gangster disciples and black disciples was taken to a new level because of the death of Mickey Bull. On August 7th, 1991, the black disciple murdered 3 members of the gangster disciple in cold blood On that hot August Wednesday night, the murder was done out of a taxi cab. Yes, a taxi cab. The black disciple actually shot them from a taxi cab, which is one of the crazy ways the gang could do a hit on someone else. The problem all started that day at 66 in Peoria. At the apartments at 6556 South Peoria Street, now torn down, when Tojo, a black disciple, came pulling up in the afternoon and taunted 3 gangster disciples. Remember, by throwing up the black disciple gang sign. One of the gangster disciples, Kevin Gill, threw up his sign and shouted "Black Disciple Killer," and Tojo said "Gangster Disciple Killer." Then someone inside the building shot at Tojo and he started to drive off. I stopped real quick to say he would be back later that night at 11 o'clock p.m. The gangster disciple was back out there selling drugs on that corner when a red and white taxi cab drove up with a red LeBaron. Both vehicles being stopped, and one of the windows on the taxi cab rolled down and the barrel of a gun appeared. As the shooting suddenly started, all 3 gangster disciples were shot, but 2 of them survived while the other died. A little while later, at 618 West 71st Street, out in front of a submarine sandwich shop, 71st and Low 9 vacant lot buildings torn down. Since then, another shooting happened in which 3 gangster disciples were shot again. 2 of them ended up dying at that corner. The taxi cab was apparently stolen to be used in this shooting, perhaps as a diversion. After all, who would expect a taxi to pull up and start shooting at you? After this shooting, there was no love anymore between gangster disciples and black disciples. It was all-out war that would never quit. The black disciples even changed their hand sign from throwing up the force to throwing up the trays or the gates by using 3 straight fingers. And in between 1991 and 1994, the south side of Chicago was in a state of intense warfare between gangster disciples and black disciples. Gang members from both gangs basically said you couldn't go anywhere during that time. It was not until 1994 when Marvell Thomas stepped in after he was cleared on a murder charge that the violence between gangster disciples and black disciples settled down for a while. As the 1990s progressed, more and more gangster disciple gang members flipped to black disciples. In the early days, there was no point on flipping from gangster disciple to black disciple because both gangs were allied against Black Pete Stone, Mickey Copeland, and Vice Lord Faction. But now, there was an alternative to being a gangster disciple and still remaining focused. While you went up against your old enemies under the People Nation, not only that, many gangster disciples had a secret animosity toward their own gang and knew flipping would not help because gangster disciples and black disciples were mostly tight. Now that the war was in permanent swing, this grown gangster disciple could flip to black disciple and several all tied to gangster disciple, unless of course they went to the joint. In January 1996, gangster disciple Governor Big Chuck Dorsey was shot and killed on the street. After this happened, the gangster disciple and black disciple had to meet at 38th and Cottage Grove in the Bronxville area. Gangster disciple and black disciple were allies at 38th and Ellis and all around the Ida B. Wells and Bannon Park project area. The death of Chuck could have brought more war in these sections, and at the low end located at 46th and Evans and Granville. At the meeting, Rimrod threw down the pitchfork to disrespect gangster disciples, but there was no violence. Instead of violence, many gangster disciples flipped the black disciple at the low end, and in the project made the black disciple numbers stronger. Rimrod was killed shortly after the meeting along with other high-ranking black disciples. But the black disciple had grown stronger at these locations. These new members were young and eager like Robert Sanford Yummy. Yummy was a young 11-year-old fresh new recruit to the black disciples in 1994. Yummy was a kid that used to steal cars and break into houses since he was 8 years old. Law enforcement could not put him in juvenile detention because he was too young, and he could not go to any more foster home because he was too violent. In August of 1994, the Black Disciple had him kill some rivals. Number blasted a 9mm pistol into a crowd of kids and accidentally killed young 14-year-old Siobhan Dean. The murder brought a lot of public outcry and attention to the Black Disciple. The Black Disciple feared that this young up-and member would snitch if he were caught by the police. Young's 14 and 16-year-old brothers lured him to a Vadok underpass, had him get on his knees, then pumped 2 bullets in the back of his head. The 2 brothers were then convicted of the murder, and a lot of attention ended up on the Black Disciple over this issue for a few years to come, despite the Black Disciple attempt to cover it up. The Black Disciples grew incredibly in the 1990s and 2000 decade. They climbed up to become one of the top 10 largest gangs in Chicagoland, with members in other states and scattered all over the suburbs. Violent gang wars erupted in the Robert Taylor and Stateway Garden Project, and gunfire echoed day and night, mainly between Black Disciples and Gangster Society. Both gangs exercised majority control of both public housing. High complexes and other gangs had a very small piece of these buildings. Therefore, the Black Disciples and Gangster Society were each other's biggest competition. In these projects, the Black Disciples showed their muscle against the larger enemy and showed relentless pursuit of violence against their foes, which gained them a massive reputation, causing many starry-eyed young black youth to want to join the gang as they grew to over 6,000 members. In 1991, the Black Disciples took over the 16-story high-rise Randolph Tower Housing Authority complex located in the Washington Park neighborhood, which was located at 6217 South Calumet Avenue, 63rd and Calumet. This large building, the Black Disciples nicknamed the Castle, where they set up a complex $45,000 a day to as much as $300,000 a day crack cocaine and heroin operation in this tower. The tower was run by Marvell Thompson, and residents and anyone were searched at the front door by armed Black Disciple guards with automatic weapons and shotguns. This operation was incredibly complex, as money from drug profits was even laundered and invested into an Atlanta nightclub, apartment buildings, and even into the rap label MOB. Black Disciple snipers were posted on the roof of the buildings equipped with high-powered and complex sniper rifles, while they wore night vision goggles at night so they could spot enemy gang members and pick them off. The building was not friendly to police officers, and Chicago police stayed away, especially after one incident where an undercover officer entered the building, and as he was patted down, a bulletproof vest was discovered. As he tried to run, a Black Disciple pulled out his pistol and shot the officer in the back, but the officer survived. The Black Disciple even became so bold that they hijacked the WCFL 104.7 radio frequency that was frequency owned by a Christian radio station in the suburb of Morris. Once you arrived in Chicago City limits, the frequency was playing gangster rap music that was described by the Chicago Tribune article. I got all this information from his having lots of foul language. The frequency owners were shocked when they drove to Midway Airport and the music suddenly took over. The frequency was also said to be used to communicate with the tower to alert the gang of any possible threats. In 2004, a massive raid by the police swept through this complex and several members were arrested. In the aftermath, it was decided the best way to stop the dealers at this complex was to tear the complex down, and in 2004 the buildings were razed. The tower was the largest drug operation the Black Disciple had ever ran, but the gang would continue to grow and open new ventures regardless. In the 2000 decade, as the Robert Taylor buildings were being torn down, The Black Disciples expanded and were eventually running territory from 43rd down to 49th in state. This brought the Black Disciples a lot of extra profit. Before the buildings all came down, by 2006, the Black Disciples also took over the 5th Ward in Newtown from the Gang Disciples. In the 2000s, the Black Disciples would continue to expand, and they opened up the Burnside neighborhood, South Denver neighborhood, Riverdale neighborhood, and Altgeld Gardens projects, Washington Park neighborhood, Calumet Heights neighborhood, South Shore neighborhood, Roseland neighborhood, Pullman neighborhood, West Pullman neighborhood, Morgan Park neighborhood, Washington Heights neighborhood. The Black Disciple also opened up in several Chicagoland suburbs and in other states. The organization had grown to over 6,000 members. In 2005, Jerome Shorty Freeman was released from prison after being put away for 16 years. In 2011, Shorty died of health issues at the age of 60. So that's the Black Disciple. And, the almighty Black Disciple Nation. Now, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make 2 videos. Because right now, the video that I'm recording now is at 2 hours. Is in almost 30 minutes. About 3 more minutes. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make it 2 hours and 30 minutes. So just give me a few minutes, then I'm gonna start recording part 2. But like I say, that's the history of Chicago. You understand? And also the history of America. As you can see, when you see these these street organizations, and let us don't forget the 1940s and 50s when African Americans, a lot of African Americans, were migrating from the South. From Tennessee, and from Tennessee, Texas, and Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Alabama, from the southern states, and going up north to cities like Chicago. And then later on, they found sometimes you have family members still, a lot of times you have family members still living in the South, while you have family members that moved up north to Chicago. And then you had all these gangs, these street gangs in Chicago. And see what was going on in Chicago was going on outside of Chicago. And so that's the history of Chicago. That's the history of America, even today. And so we're going to continue this conversation. But like I said, I'm going to get ready to end part 1. And it's going to be dated 12/2/2019, part 1. And then I'm going to start part 2. So just give me a few seconds now. I'll make this it'll be exactly 2 hours and 30 minutes.